This is a heist for the Toronto Maple Leafs as some new reports and rumors have dropped surrounding a Leafs trade that not only is very intriguing, but has big implications going forward. We're going to break down exactly what this trade is and discuss the player. Also, an interesting update surrounding a couple of other key Leafs, including Morgan Riley. A ton to go over today, but before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support's been unbelievable. So thank you guys for that. The regular season is inching closer and closer, and this is the spot for and the place to be for daily Leafs content. About 70% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed. 71% to be exact. Let's dive right into it today. There's a lot to go over, and we're going to be talking about a trade. We haven't talked about trades too much in the past couple days. Obviously, had a prospect video before this one. But there's a new one that has emerged, and I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are. But also, most importantly, you guys in the comment section down below. Very curious to see your guys' thoughts on this because you can see this article that dropped here. Blockbuster trade brewing, Leafs linked to a Sergachev trade, which let's dive right into it because this one, there's a lot of different tidbits of information to dive into here. So you can see this here. Maple Leafs discussing trade for Sergachev. On Sunday, reporter Howard Berger of Between the Posts tweeted out that Toronto and Utah have had discussions around Sergachev, told the Leafs have talked to Utah about defenseman Mikhail Sergachev. And again, take it with a grain of salt. This isn't a super reliable reporter, but at the same time, we're going to discuss it either way here. Darius, age 27, cap hit of $8.5 million. And this one, is it super likely? I'm not entirely sure at this point, but of course, we're going to discuss it. It does make a lot of sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially with the way that Elliot Friedman has been talking about how the Leafs are handling this offseason and the way Brad Treliving's comments have been going and his previous moves. If they're going to make a big deal for somebody, it would be for someone like Mikhail Sergachev, who has control, is younger, and would help this team beyond, of course, this upcoming year.
Yeah, absolutely. It would make a lot of sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And again, this is not coming from Elliot Friedman or anything like that. No disrespect to Howard Berger or anything like that. But again, keep that in mind. It's not coming from Chris Johnson or anything like that. But, I do believe that the Leafs have kicked tires on a lot of different options in terms of their defense and reimagining their defense. We've heard, from Brad Treliving and other sources throughout the summer, as soon as it started right after they were eliminated from the playoffs, that, they're going to explore all options. And trading for Sergachev, listen, they could come away with another heist here because it's not the first time this summer that they've robbed the Utah Hockey Club, or I guess the Utah Mammoth at this point. Obviously with Michelli, which I think is going to work out very well for them. But not so sure why Utah would want to trade away probably their best defenseman in this scenario. But again, for the Maple Leafs, makes a lot of sense. This is a younger defenseman than Morgan Riley, who would ultimately play in that role as a top line left defense. Again, younger option. Sergachev is a premier defenseman in this league. He's won a Stanley Cup. He has a plethora of playoff experience. He's just a great defenseman on both sides of the puck. Like, he can offer offense. He's great defensively as well. Physical, right? We've seen that in the past too. So he brings everything to the table. This would be a no-brainer for the Leafs. This would make them so much better. And, ultimately you would have to think that Morgan Riley in this scenario would be going the other way. He would have to waive his no movement clause. I don't know if you'd want to do that for a place like Utah, but it would make a lot of sense in terms of the salary cap. You have the salary to make that work. He makes $1 million more than Morgan Riley, and we'll get into the specifics of it in a second. But I think it makes a lot of sense, and it makes the Leafs a lot better and reimagines the defense a little bit.
Yeah, another cap current space is 1.9 million. Now, you'd obviously send out a bunch of money in a trade like this. What does Sergachev bring? I mean, we all know winning pedigree, but also, he would be one of the best defenders in the league. You could argue would be the best defenseman on the Leafs, obviously depending on what way you view it. And you can see a mock trade that this article dropped based on the report. So this is Morgan Riley, Topi Niemela, and a draft pick for Sergachev with a little bit of retention. Would this be enough? That's the question. Now, the draft pick, what kind of pick would that be? The Leafs are obviously don't have a ton. They obviously give up a couple first-round picks last year's trade deadline. But there's obviously, it would be a Morgan Riley for Mikhail Sergachev, not one-for-one swap. The Leafs would need to add some more. But the more you look at it, this is one where, for the first time in a while, at least, we're discussing a trade that I actually really like for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, you look at the section of, the stance of their Leafs team currently: McCabe, Tanev, Riley, Carlo, Benoit, OEL. We've been discussing some, replacements for Simon Benoit. We've been discussing a lot of different things here. And it all stems from the report earlier on in the in the offseason about the Leafs being willing to swap defensemen and mix around the defensive unit. I mean, we think about the Brandon Carlo trade. The Leafs were reportedly, according to Elliot Friedman, at least open to shopping him. We don't know if he actually were shopping him officially, but open to shopping Brandon Carlo, which makes things very interesting. And He's, according to NHL Network, again, I don't put too much stock into these rankings, but just to give you kind of a general idea, 18th best defenseman in the NHL. Where does Morgan Rielly rank in here? We'll let you guys come up with that one. But Darius, he is an absolute stud here, and it would be a steal. And something that I think goes underrated with a lot of us who, of course, aren't privy to front office information here. They obviously, Bryce Living clearly has some sort of relationship with Utah. They made a trade just a few weeks ago, a few months ago, and that could be helpful here. Of course, the former Lightning.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, they've made a trade before this offseason, right? Michelli coming to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But yeah, in terms of Sergachev coming over, like, yeah, it makes that defense so much better. I think on paper, if you look at the Leafs defense right now, it definitely wasn't the problem in the playoffs. I think you could win a Stanley Cup with the defense the way it's currently constructed. I think they did a really good thing in bringing Carlo over. And then if you were to add Sergachev to that instead of Morgan Rielly, it's that much better. Listen, I love Morgan Rielly. I think he's going to bounce back this season. But I think Mikhail Sergachev is a better defenseman and he's won a Stanley Cup. Let's just be honest about it, right? But again, I think that makes a ton of sense. But in terms of, what goes out the other way, because it has to be worthwhile for Utah, you're giving up a great defenseman that they just traded for as well, right? Relatively new to the team. You're going to have to give up some assets. And Niemela, to me, he's not even playing in North America. We've covered that on the channel. So that doesn't make much sense to me and a draft pick. I don't know why Utah would want that. I think that, when you look up and down the Leafs lineup, they do have some assets and they have a lot of players right now. We've been talking about how, David Kampf and Calle Jarnkrok are on the roster, probably wouldn't make my lineup opening night, right? So I'm not saying that Utah wants those guys, but maybe you go into camp and you're like, okay, maybe Bobby McMahon is expendable, right? And I keep bringing up his name and other people's names. Nick Robertson, okay, maybe he doesn't have a spot on this team. We don't know for sure. And I'm not saying to trade those names specifically, but when you go into camp, for example, and you go, all right, these guys actually don't have a spot on this team. Let's find them a new home. Let's see if there's a trade that works. If you conclude one of those guys, then yeah, I do think Utah is definitely more interested. You're going to have to probably include a draft pick as well, but I think you just become a lot better. The problem, I think, the last couple of years was in the offense and the fact that you couldn't score when it mattered most because the lineup was too top heavy. You have the goaltending figured out, you have the defense figured out to a degree. If you added a piece like Sergachev, it's that much better, and you get more offense from your back end as well, which has been an issue over the last maybe year or so. So I think it makes a lot of sense, but will it ultimately happen? I'm not so sure. I don't even know if the Leafs are going to make a trade before the season starts at this point. I do think that they're going to make another move over the course of the season, but it's looking more and more likely here like they want to just see what they have, some of the puzzle pieces they have, and see what fits where.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of different articles linking the Leafs to Sergachev. There's been a lot of different articles linking Morgan Rielly out of Toronto. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens here. And obviously, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But let's dive into his stats a little bit here now. And quickly before I wrap up, for those unfamiliar with Sergachev, in case you weren't watching too many Utah games, 53 points in 77 games. Compare that to Morgan Rielly, 41 points in 82 games. The big difference here is that, Morgan Rielly was coming off a much, when he extended with the Leafs and signed that big contract, he had a fantastic year. Sergachev is also a pretty solid defender. Oh, not Michelli. Sergachev is a pretty solid defender and someone that, he's a better player than Morgan Rielly at this point. There's no arguing that. The question is, who will be better next year? I think it'll be Sergachev. And we know the Leafs have done business in the past and a lot this offseason with guys like Michelli, Dakota Joshua, Nicola Watt, and more. So that'll wrap it up. Let us know down below. Do you want to see Morgan Rielly traded this offseason? And do you think Sergachev is a good fit? Thank you guys for watching. See you later.